Passengers, which I think is out today. A lot of stuff that we're reviewing is out either Boxing Day or New Year's Day. But so this is out today. So this is directed by Morton Tilden, who made Headhunters and The Imitation Game, both which I quite liked, and written by John Spates, I think it's pronounced. A script that was been around for a long time. At one point was on the blacklist of, greatest unproduced screenplays, and nearly went into production, I think, at one point with Keanu Reeves. Now arrives with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. So the story is, in the future, Earthlings are making their way to new planets to start new lives, okay? But the planets are the place that they're going to is a very, very long way away. This is kind of like a Blade Runner, off-world colony thing. Like it takes a century to get there. So in order to get to where you're going, you have to go into hibernation, into cybersleep, whatever they call it, which is something that we see a lot in movies, whether it's Alien or 2001. So this ship is making its way through its something like 100-year voyage, and en route it runs into a meteor storm. I think they're asteroids when they're in space, they're meteors when they come down. Is that right? Thank you for clearing that up. And one of these
sounds about right.
One of these big rocky things floating around in space, does some damage. And the next thing, one of the sleeping pods opens up, and Chris Pratt, who's Jim Preston, who is an engineer, wakes up. And he wakes up, and the ship says, "Hello, blah blah. We're nearing the place that we're going to." And he starts wandering around. He suddenly realizes that he's the only person on the ship. And the only other person on the ship is a robot barman played by Michael Sheen, doing his very, very best robot barman. And he starts to, in the bar, incidentally, which looks like it's modelled on the Overlook Hotel from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, it's kind of this great, big and cavernous and creepy and distinctly empty. And he starts to realise that there's nothing, he's got 90 years to go on the ship, and he's on his own, and there's nothing he can do. And so he starts to go quietly mad. And at some point in his quiet madness, he decides he's going to have to wake somebody up because he needs company. And through going through the ship's logs, he basically falls in love with Jennifer Lawrence's character. And without telling her that this is what he did, he causes her pod to wake her up. So in doing something to give himself a companion, he has basically condemned her to the same fate to which he is condemned. Crucially, he doesn't tell her that's the case, and she doesn't know. She actually thinks he's quite a decent companion.
You have a visitor.
Wow.
You clean up pretty good yourself. You went shopping.
I went shoplifting.
You two look fine this evening.
We're on a date.
Very nice.
Took you long enough to ask.
I was giving you space.
Oh, space. The one thing I do not need more of.
Now, we wrestled with which clip to use, whether to use that clip or whether to use the one in which he discovers that he's in space on his own for 90 years, because actually one of the things about the film is it has very, very different tonal shifts. There is, during that opening sequence, when he realises that he's on his own and he will die up in space because he's not going to, he's by the time he gets to the planet, he's going to be 100 years old. And there's that brief moment of, okay, well, I can do anything I want, so I can use all the sports facilities, I can, do all that stuff. And then suddenly the terrible horror of being alone on a spaceship with only a robot companion, which obviously draws comparison with Silent Running, Doug Trumbull's film, which is one of my favourite movies of all time. As I said, there is definitely a comparison with the Overlook and Stanley Kubrick. And in its wildest dreams, I think the film is also edging towards Solaris, probably the Steven Soderbergh Solaris, as opposed to the original Solaris. And it's had pretty sniffy reviews. And the thing that most of the reviewers seem to take issue with is that the film isn't able to deal with the seriousness of the crime committed, of waking somebody up in order to give yourself a companion. Although actually that's not true, because when I went to see the film, just before I went in, somebody said to me, "You're sharpening up your knife." And I went, "Why?" Because I hadn't read it. They said, "Well, you haven't seen the reviews." I went, "No, I haven't read anything about it at all." I went, "Oh, okay, fine." So it may be that I was slightly primed for it, but actually I enjoyed it more than I thought it was going to. I mean, it's preposterous nonsense. It makes no sense whatsoever. If he's woken up, all this way away from where they're meant to be, Why do all the whole of the rest of the ship behave as if his presence is completely? Why isn't the whole ship in hibernation? It makes no sense at all. That said, once you've accepted that it makes no sense and that its essential setup is completely preposterous and abstract, and it starts to be quite enjoyable. And actually, I think that it does wrestle, or at least tussle, with the idea.
Is that like a mild wrestle?
It's like a mild wrestle. Tussle with the idea that the central character has done something really, really creepy. In fact, what he's done is referred to at one point as murder. It's, you've stolen this life. In order to give yourself a companion, you have essentially stolen somebody else's life. And the story then is about, how people can or can't work out the rest of their, everything else, having understood that there are only two people on this ship, and one of them you hate. And, one of them, because you've done something absolutely terrible, unless, of course, she doesn't find out, which is his whole point about not telling at the beginning. So there are those things going on as undercurrents. It doesn't have any great depth. It's all to do with surface. It has the worst music choice I think I have ever encountered towards the end of the film. And it looks like silly, glossy, problematic nonsense that you could take against if you felt that what it was doing was just being utterly frivolous with its central conceit, because the central conceit is so creepy. The central conceit is so, there is something really, really creepy about it. But I actually think that the movie has a sense of that creepiness. I think the movie does have a sense of that what he's done is completely, unforgivably wrong. And although there is no great depth beyond that understanding, I think the movie then toys with, as I said, tussles with, rather than properly wrestles with or grapples with. I mean, a different director would have made a very different movie. This is froth. This is cappuccino froth. This is the fizz on the top of a glass of, Prosecco, since we're at Christmas. And it has no substance and no weight. But I enjoyed it. And I went to see it with Simon from our production team. And I think Simon felt the same thing.
We don't care what he thinks.
No, but because it was weird, because I had expected to not, because I'd heard, the bad thing just before I went in, and I think we both thought, what, that was kind of fun. I mean, daft fun, but fun.